The concert was sold out. 18,000 fans screaming for Elvis. Then he stopped the show for one little boy in the front row. What happened next didn't just silence the crowd. It left thousands in tears and changed one child's final days forever. The arena was electric that night. September heat pressed down on the packed Coliseum, thousands of fans waiting since early afternoon for the doors to open. This was Elvis's second show that evening, but his hometown crowds always got special treatment. Memphis was where it all began, and Elvis never forgot that. The king took the stage wearing his white jumpsuit with gold studs. He looked tired from performing twice in one night, his movements slower than usual. But when the spotlight hit him, the exhaustion seemed to melt away. Elvis grabbed the microphone and worked through a string of early hits before settling into the slower, more intimate part of his set. The crowd had been on their feet, screaming and reaching toward the stage. The arena shook with thousands of voices singing along. Then something shifted. Elvis wiped his forehead with a towel and signaled to his band. The lights dimmed. The crowd settled back into their seats, sensing the change. This was where Elvis connected with his audience on a deeper level. In the third row sat a family with their small son between them. The boy was pale and thin, his frame dwarfed by the arena seat. They'd saved for months to afford these tickets. The mother worked double shifts at the hospital, and the father had taken on weekend construction jobs. Their son loved Elvis more than anything in the world. His bedroom walls were covered with posters, and he knew every song by heart. The parents knew this would probably be his last concert. The doctors had been clear about his condition. Time was running out. But tonight, surrounded by thousands of Elvis fans, they tried to push those thoughts away. They wanted to give their son one perfect moment. The celebration continued around them. Fans laughed and sang and took pictures. But this family sat in their own quiet bubble of hope and heartbreak. The mother held her son's hand, feeling how cold his fingers had become. She watched his eyes light up as Elvis moved across the stage, and she wished she could freeze this moment forever. Elvis could feel the energy from his hometown audience. These were his people. They'd supported him when he was nobody, and they'd stayed loyal through all the changes in his career. Tonight felt different somehow, more charged with emotion than usual. The band began the opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Elvis moved to center stage, his voice soft and tender. The arena grew quiet, thousands of people preparing to sing along to his most beloved ballad. The stage was set for something no one could have predicted. Elvis was halfway through "Can't Help Falling in Love" when it happened. Thousands of voices were singing along, the familiar melody filling every corner of the arena. The crowd swayed together, lost in the romance of the moment. Then suddenly, cutting through all that music and all those voices, came a sound that changed everything. "Elvis, please! My son is dying. He loves you so much." The voice wasn't just loud. It carried something else, something that made people stop singing and turn their heads. Raw desperation, pure anguish, the kind of pain that cuts through noise and music and everything else because it comes from the deepest part of a mother's heart. Elvis kept singing, but his head turned slightly toward the crowd. He'd heard something, but he couldn't quite make out what it was. The band continued playing behind him. The spotlight stayed on his face. But something had shifted. His rhythm faltered for just a second. The people sitting near the family heard every word. A woman in the second row turned around, her hand flying to her mouth when she saw the pale little boy. Whispers started spreading outward like ripples in water. "There's a sick child. His mother is calling for Elvis. Oh my God, look at that little boy." The mother screamed again, louder this time. "Elvis, please help us. Danny is dying." This time, Elvis heard her clearly. Witnesses say he stopped singing mid-verse, something he almost never did in 20 years of performing. The band kept playing for a few more measures before they realized what was happening. One by one, the instruments fell silent. The crowd singing faded to confused murmurs. Elvis stood at the center of the stage, microphone in his hand, staring out into the third row. He could see a woman standing up, tears streaming down her face. She was pointing to a small boy in the seat next to her. The boy was so pale, he seemed to glow in the arena lights. The entire arena held its breath. Thousands of people waited to see what would happen next. Elvis squinted through the stage lights, trying to get a better look at the family. His hand went to his chest, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. People in the crowd started putting the pieces together. They could see the wheelchair folded up beside the boy's seat. They could see how carefully his father was supporting him. They could see the desperate love in his mother's eyes as she continued to wave her arms, trying to get Elvis's attention. According to some accounts, Elvis later told friends that seeing the boy reminded him of his own childhood illnesses and how his mother had fought for him when he was sick. The memory of Gladys Presley's protective love came flooding back, even though she'd been gone for 17 years. The arena stayed silent. The band waited. The crowd waited. Even the security guards stopped moving, sensing that something important was happening. Elvis stood motionless at center stage, caught between the performance everyone expected and the family that needed him. What happened next broke every rule of professional performance. Elvis had every reason to keep the show going: schedules, paying fans, and a strict performance routine. Yet he chose otherwise, according to those who were there. He raised his hand toward his band. A simple gesture, but everyone understood. The music stopped completely, not just fading out or winding down, but cutting off sharp and clean. The sudden silence felt heavy, almost shocking after all that melody and rhythm. Thousands of people held their breath, waiting to see what their hero would do next. He walked to the very edge of the stage and set his microphone down on the floor. The sound echoed through the arena's speaker system. People in the front rows could see his face clearly now. They could see the tears forming in his eyes. They could see him making a decision that went against everything he'd been taught about performing. Elvis's empathy, shaped by his own childhood struggles with illness, was clear to those who watched. He looked out at little Danny Sullivan, so small and fragile in that arena seat. His mother was still standing, still hoping, still believing that somehow Elvis could make everything better. The crowd was getting restless. People shifted in their seats. Whispers grew louder. Someone coughed. A security guard near the stage looked up at Elvis with concern, wondering if something was wrong. The spotlight operator kept the beam steady on Elvis's face, but even he seemed confused about what was happening. The gasps started in the front rows and spread backward like a wave. People realized what was about to happen. The king of rock and roll was about to leave his throne. He was about to step down from the stage and into the crowd, breaking every rule of concert performance. Security guards started moving, but Elvis waved them back. This moment belonged to him and the Sullivan family. He moved toward the steps at the side of the stage, his white jumpsuit catching the lights as he descended. The arena fell into a hush so complete you could hear individual voices whispering in the back rows. Elvis had performed for presidents and movie stars. He'd sold millions of records and filled the biggest venues in the world, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was a 7-year-old boy who loved his music and a mother who believed in miracles. The king was about to become something else entirely. He was about to show thousands of people what happened when fame and fortune took a back seat to simple human compassion. As he reached the arena floor and began walking toward the third row, Elvis Presley was no longer just a performer on a stage. He was about to prove that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is step down from their pedestal and meet someone exactly where they are. Elvis walked toward the third row, and the arena transformed around him. People reached out as he passed, but gently now, understanding something sacred was happening. The crowd parted naturally, creating a path to the Sullivan family without anyone needing to ask. His longtime aides moved toward him immediately, but Elvis held up his hand without looking back. This broke every security protocol they'd established over the years, but they stopped in their tracks, recognizing that some moments are bigger than safety concerns. The path formed like people were following unspoken choreography. A woman in the second row stepped aside. A man moved his jacket from an empty seat. Fans who had been screaming just minutes before now watched in complete silence. They could see Elvis's face as he walked past them. The stage makeup couldn't hide his tears. The rhinestone jumpsuit couldn't disguise the fact that he was just a man walking toward another human being in pain. Danny was slumped in his seat when Elvis reached the third row. The boy was gravely ill and visibly fragile, his small frame dwarfed by the arena chair. Mary Sullivan was still standing, her hands shaking as she watched Elvis approach. Robert Sullivan had his arm around his wife, both of them hardly believing what they were seeing. Elvis knelt down beside Danny's chair. The arena floor was concrete, hard and cold, but he didn't seem to notice. He was eye level with the boy now, close enough to see how labored his breathing was, how pale his skin had become. Danny's eyes opened wider when he realized who was kneeling next to him. Thousands of people fell completely silent. The hush was so complete you could hear the air conditioning system humming overhead. Security guards stopped moving. Photographers stopped clicking. Even the vendors in the hallway seemed to sense that something important was happening inside the arena. Elvis reached out and gently took Danny's small hand in both of his. The boy's fingers were cold and thin, but they squeezed back with surprising strength. When Elvis finally spoke, his voice was soft and warm. Nothing like the powerful voice that had been filling the arena just minutes before. He told the boy softly that he'd heard Danny was one of his biggest fans. Then he gently offered to bring him forward, asking if Danny would like to come up with him. The exact words were lost to most of the crowd, but the tenderness in Elvis's voice carried to the first few rows. Danny's eyes filled with tears, but he managed to nod. His parents looked at each other in disbelief. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. What followed would create a moment unlike anything anyone in that arena had ever witnessed. Elvis was about to show thousands of people what happened when all the trappings of stardom fell away, leaving only one human being reaching out to comfort another. The king was about to give the most powerful performance of his entire career, and it wouldn't involve a single spotlight or microphone. Witnesses later described Elvis lifting Danny from his wheelchair, the boy weighing almost nothing in his arms. Danny's head fell back against Elvis's chest, too weak to support itself, but his eyes stayed locked on Elvis's face. Those eyes held wonder and disbelief and something else. Hope. Pure, desperate hope that somehow this moment could make everything better. Elvis began walking toward the stage, humming softly. No microphone, no amplification, just his voice, low and gentle, carrying across the silent arena. The melody was reportedly a tender ballad, but quieter than anyone had ever heard it before. More like a lullaby than a love song. Danny's parents followed behind them, Mary Sullivan still crying, Robert Sullivan shaking his head in amazement. Thousands of people watched in complete silence. Security guards stood frozen at their posts. Photographers lowered their cameras. Even the stage crew stopped working, understanding that this moment was too sacred to interrupt. The arena felt like a church. Elvis reached the stage and sat down on the edge, his legs hanging over the side. Danny fit perfectly in his lap. The boy's small frame nestled against Elvis's chest. The rhinestone jumpsuit probably felt rough against Danny's skin, but he didn't seem to care. He was exactly where he wanted to be. According to those who were there, Elvis began to sing unaccompanied. His voice filled the arena naturally. the acoustics carrying every note to the farthest seats. People in the back rows leaned forward, straining to hear every word. This wasn't a performance anymore, it was something much more personal. Danny tried to sing along, his voice barely a whisper. Elvis heard him anyway. He leaned his head down closer to the boys, their faces almost touching. They sang together, the king of rock and roll and a dying 7-year-old, creating harmony that touched everyone who heard it. Elvis's voice started to crack during the song. The emotion was too much, even for someone who had performed thousands of times. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he kept singing. Danny needed this. Danny's parents needed this. Maybe Elvis needed this too. Then Danny reportedly whispered something that only Elvis could hear. The boy was scared. The words were so quiet they didn't reach anyone else, but they hit Elvis like a physical blow. He stopped singing for a moment, gathering himself, thinking about what to say to a child who was facing something no child should ever have to face. Elvis held Danny tighter and spoke softly into his ear. Witnesses say he comforted the boy with words about music and comfort, his voice steady now, filled with the kind of certainty that only comes from deep faith. He told Danny that music would always be with him, even in heaven. The crowd couldn't hear these words, but they could see the tenderness in Elvis's face. They could see Danny's small smile. They could feel the love passing between them. What happened next transformed those thousands of strangers into something like a family, united by witnessing the most genuine act of compassion many of them had ever seen. As Elvis continued holding Danny and singing softly, something began stirring in the crowd around them. It started with one voice from somewhere in the front rows. A woman joined in singing, her voice soft and careful. Then another voice picked up the melody. Then another. The sound spread through the arena like ripples across water. The crowd joined in, softly turning the song into a lullaby. But this wasn't like the earlier part of the concert when the crowd had been loud and energetic. These voices were different. Gentle. Reverent. People sang quietly, almost whispering the words. The entire song transformed from a love ballad into something that sounded like a prayer. Danny turned his head to look out at the crowd, his eyes growing wide with wonder. All these people were singing just for him. Thousands of strangers had become his personal choir. His small hand reached up toward Elvis's face, and he whispered something that made Elvis smile through his tears. Elvis realized what the crowd was doing, and the emotion overwhelmed him completely. His voice broke as he tried to keep singing along with them. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't try to hide them. This wasn't about putting on a show anymore. This was about something much bigger than entertainment. People throughout the arena began reaching for each other. Strangers held hands. A man in the 10th row put his arm around the woman sitting next to him, someone he'd never met before. An elderly couple near the back stood up and swayed together. Teenagers who had come to scream at their idol found themselves crying instead. The arena transformed completely. The concert venue became something closer to a church. The air felt thick with emotion and reverence. Even the security guards had tears in their eyes. The photographers stopped taking pictures, understanding that some moments are too sacred to capture. Witnesses later recalled that Danny smiled for the first time that evening. It was a small smile, weak but genuine. His parents saw it from where they stood at the edge of the stage. Mary Sullivan covered her mouth with both hands, overcome by the sight of her son looking happy. Robert Sullivan wiped his eyes with his sleeve. The song continued, thousands of voices creating harmony that seemed to come from heaven itself. People sang softly, their voices blending together into something beautiful and pure. The acoustics of the arena carried every note perfectly, creating a sound unlike anything anyone there had ever experienced. Elvis looked out at the crowd as they sang. amazed by what was happening. Thousands of people had become one voice, one heart, one family united around a dying child. The entire arena had spontaneously turned a love song into the most powerful lullaby in concert history. When the song ended, there was no applause at the end, only a prolonged hush. The moment was too perfect to break with cheering. According to the family, Danny had fallen asleep in Elvis's arms, exhausted but peaceful. His breathing was steady and calm for the first time all evening. Elvis stood up carefully, still holding the sleeping boy. He looked out at the crowd one more time, and they looked back at him. Everyone understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that would change how they saw the man behind the legend forever. Elvis carried Danny back to his parents, the boy still sleeping peacefully in his arms. The family gathered together at the edge of the stage, and for a few precious minutes they existed in their own private world while thousands of people watched in respectful silence. Many attendees later told reporters or wrote letters describing how the night affected them. The story spread across the country in the following days. This was before social media, before cell phone videos. But word traveled anyway. People who were there called their friends and family. They wrote letters to newspapers. They shared the story wherever they went. Letters reportedly poured into Elvis's Graceland mansion in the weeks that followed. Fans who had witnessed the moment wrote to describe how it changed their perspective. Some said the night taught them what real strength looked like. Others wrote that they finally understood the difference between fame and character. The story took on a life of its own, growing more meaningful with each retelling. For the Sullivan family, that night became a source of strength during their darkest time. According to later accounts, Danny had several peaceful days after the concert. His parents said he talked about Elvis constantly during his final weeks. He would hum the songs when the pain got bad. He would tell the nurses about the night when thousands of people sang just for him. The memory gave him comfort when nothing else could. The family later said that Elvis didn't just give their son a beautiful memory. He gave them proof that kindness still existed in the world, that people could surprise you with their goodness when you least expected it. Mary Sullivan kept the ticket stubs from that concert, framing them as a reminder of the night a stranger showed them what compassion looked like. For many who were there, the night revealed a side of Elvis that would be remembered long after the songs. Critics had spent years dismissing him as nothing but flash and spectacle. They called him a showman without substance, but this moment offered a different perspective. Here was someone who cared more about one sick child than his own reputation. The rhinestone jumpsuit and slicked-back hair suddenly seemed less significant than the man underneath it all. This story became part of Elvis's legacy, separate from his music entirely. People stopped talking only about his hit records and gold albums. They started talking about his character, about the night he proved that fame and fortune meant nothing compared to helping someone in need. This moment revealed something profound about Elvis's true nature behind all the celebrity. It showed that beneath the stage persona lived a man who never forgot what it felt like to be vulnerable. Someone who would sacrifice anything to ease another person's pain. The boy from Tupelo who had grown up poor and sick understood suffering in ways that no amount of success could erase. That understanding made him willing to risk everything for a stranger's child. It made him human in a way that all his performances never could. The night showed that real greatness isn't always measured in the ways we expect. Stories like this remind us why Elvis became more than just an entertainer. That night, many fans were reminded that greatness can also mean simple, brave acts of compassion. When faced with a choice between maintaining his performance and helping a dying child, Elvis chose humanity over showmanship. The next time you have the chance to help someone, remember the night the king proved that sometimes the greatest acts happen when the music stops. If this story touched you, tell us a memory of Elvis, or someone who made a difference in the comments below. If you loved this story, consider subscribing for more remembered moments from Elvis's life.